Aloha and welcome to this week's video. I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a little bit of an illness, so my voice might sound a little rasp, but we'll see what we can do. So you might recognize this cutout of this piece. So this is previously I made a giveaway for Maui, for Lahaina, and the fire. The piece of koa that I used was really thick, and so I spliced it down the middle, and this was a thinner section from that splice. And it was just barely large enough that I could still make a piece out of it. It's still a little bit thinner than I would like, so it's going to be a slightly different style, but I still wanted to keep it. But I didn't want to make the exact same piece for a variety of reasons, and so I was kind of thinking about what I was going to do with it, and the idea that I came up with was to laminate a darker koa to the outer edge of the blade on the leo mano, and then from there glue that into place, and so I'd have like a two-tone koa with just the blade, just the edge of the koa being that laminated koa. And then I broke if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I broke my Chris knife that I made with a marlin bill, and so I'm gonna be using that the broken section of that marlin bill on the back end side of the leo mano for a dagger, a pahoa. But before I get to that, I already finished cutting this out, and then I fine-tuned the fit between the blade and the outer edge. I just wanted to make sure that there was as little gap as possible, and then I mixed some koa wood shavings with the wood glue to kind of darken the wood glue up a little bit and hide that gap a little bit more. And then I'm just going to go ahead and glue this up, and then I let this sit for I think it was 24 hours. It's not a 24-hour glue, it's like an 8-hour glue, but I let it sit for 24 hours anyway. And before I get to shaping down the blade, I'm going to go ahead and prep actually the dagger side. And so there's the broken marlin bill from the Chris knife that I made. I dropped it on the ground, and it hit perfectly in the wrong way and snapped right off. So I cut off the broken segment, and then I'm going to go ahead and set this using a tongue and groove joint. The wood isn't deep enough to do a mortise and tenon, and so a tongue and groove will just be a better joint between the handle of the leo mano and the marlin bill itself. And then there's a little bit of fine tuning just to make sure that I've got a nice snug fit here. So same thing between the two different grains of koa. I want to minimize how much gapping there is between the joint here and the marlin bill and the wood. And the other reason for that is just strength. It just makes for a stronger joint. And then I'm going to use epoxy mixed with wood shavings, similar to what I did except for with wood glue on the koa. And then once I let this sit into place, I'll let this sit for 24 hours as well, just so it has a nice strong cure. And the next step here before I start shaping is I'm going to cut out the blade section of this, and then I'm going to put in the cross peg on the marlin bill joint. The section here, I cut that out, and then as I was looking at it, I kind of just wanted to bring it down before I put in the peg, but I'm just leveling at that point in time, going from the center. So normally what I would do on a leo mano like this is I would have a center ridge that tapers all the way to the outer edges. So there's the broken handle from that Chris knife. Oh, I still can't believe that happened. But it's okay. I was going to make a dagger, or not a dagger. I was going to make a throwing knife out of that broken section. But a marlin bill really can't handle the stress of being thrown. And I like to test most of my weapons, and since I can't throw it, I decided I was going to use it on a different piece, and this piece turned out to be a perfect match for it. So I went ahead and put in that cross peg. I just used an 1/8 inch peg, drilled in a hole, used some wood glue, put that in, or epoxy actually, not wood glue. And then I noticed a little bit of gapping on the glue up, as well as some cracks, and so I filled those with CA glue and wood shavings. Let that sit, and then I'm going to go and just clean that up and get to sanding. So the shaping that I did on the blade is pretty basic. pretty much all I did on the blade is I tapered just the darker side of the koa. So that goes down to almost an edge. Obviously not a complete edge because I still need to cut in the grooves for the shark teeth. But then on the flat side of the leomano, it's flat, which normally I don't do. Normally I put a ridge line so that it creates a diamond taper across the whole piece. But it's too thin of a piece to do that. And so I just did a flat main body section and then tapered just the edges. And then there's a little bit of tapering on the handle and then rounding on the handle as well. And then from there, just a ton of sanding. I'm going to be sanding this piece to 320, which is normally what I sand my pieces to. For this piece, I probably could have taken it to a higher grit just because the curl in the koa was absolutely gorgeous. But I ended up taking it just at 320. It worked out actually really well. But the sanding is actually where I do the majority of my fine shaping. So even if I'm using a chisel, I'll use the sanding paper and the sanding disc to really clean up those edges and make them look nice and crisp. But once I got the piece sanded down to 220, I cut in the grooves. And then from here, I'll clean up those grooves a little bit and then finish sanding the entire piece down to 320 so that I can get it ready for putting in the teeth. So I'm going to put in the teeth before I oil it. But before I do that, I just want to make sure all of the sides are looking good. Make sure there aren't any scratches, any dings. Because once the teeth are put in place, it makes it a lot more challenging to freely sand all of these areas. And so I like to do pretty much all of the sanding for the most part, up until putting in the tiger shark teeth. And this is sanding again down to 320 grit, which is a finer sandpaper. So the higher number you get on your grit, the finer the sandpaper, so the smoother the finish. Some pieces I'll take to a smoother finish than that. This one I just took to 320. And then I'm going to be just putting a little bit of epoxy in the groove. I'm not filling the groove up. I use the epoxy to kind of help hold the teeth in place. And it just makes it easier so when I go to tap holes into the teeth, that they stay in place. And when I go to lash them, I don't have to hassle with them too much. So it just makes it easier on the next steps of the process. And the bit that I'm using here is just a tungsten carbide bit, the small bit. I can't remember the size. I want to say it's close to 1/8 of an inch, but it's around that size, maybe a little smaller. It's a tapered bit, so one side gets a little bit thicker than the other. Here, I had a kind of a struggle figuring out where I wanted to drill the holes for the lashing. I either was going to put it in the darker koa or on the inside of the blade. I kind of decided I wanted the look of a longer lash, and so I ended up marking it just inside the groove, and I think that turned out really nice. I was a little worried at first that it wouldn't look too good, but once I start drilling, it's kind of too late. So the first step is I mark it with a pencil, and then I come back with the nail. And this starts each of the holes. It just makes it so that the drill bit doesn't walk on me as I go to drill. You still want to be careful, but it helps a lot in preventing the bit from walking. Now right here, the koa is flat, so it wouldn't have walked that much anyway. It really helps a lot more when you're trying to drill on a tapered or angled section, but it still helps out. And then before I get to oiling the piece, cleaning up all of the excess epoxy, sanding down those drill holes, and get everything nice and clean and good to 320. And I was super excited the entire time. I couldn't wait to oil this piece. I knew the center koa was already a heavy curl because it's the same piece of koa that I used for the giveaway. And the giveaway was just an absolutely gorgeous piece of koa wood. And then mixed with that darker koa, which also had a nice curl to it. Man, it just looks awesome. It's actually a pretty big piece too. I wasn't expecting it to end up being that large of a piece, but it just turned into an absolutely gorgeous piece. And I still have some work to do on this, but up to this point, it's just looking gorgeous. And the bill actually turned out great. I was kind of worried that it was going to look kind of funky, but it turned out great. So it's a great second life for that marlin bill. Definitely wasn't going to throw that away. Still plenty of material on it that I could do something with it. So this worked out perfect. So the next step here is just going to be lashing the teeth into place. So they are epoxied, but the epoxy really doesn't hold that strong and it degrades over time. The lash is the primary mechanical hold. Just like on scales on a knife handle, you put, a cross pin, not just gluing it together. And so I'm lashing a triangle pattern into the teeth, which is a traditional pattern. There's a few different traditional patterns. The triangle pattern is just one of my favorites. There's a crossover pattern I've done before. There's a W pattern I've done before. There's pegging, and I've done that before as well. But the triangle pattern I kind of like the best, just because I like the way that it looks. And it the triangle shape in Hawaii resembles shark teeth, is the meaning for it. So the last step here is to lash up the joint between the bill and the handle. It is glued in place and it has a cross peg, so it's pretty solid as is, but the lashing will help strengthen those koa, those little leaves that are on either side of the marlin bill, because they're kind of thin, and so the lashing will give it some additional strength, so that way it won't break as easily. And I think it also gives it a nice contrast. It looks good as well, and it's something for your hand to slide down against. So if you're swinging the piece, there's a little bit of a grip down there if needed. So I'm doing just a basic wrap, and then I'm tightening one end. There's a loop left on the other, and so as I wrap around itself, I pull the loop tight and it locks everything into place. And then I just tuck the excess underneath, and then a final coat to finish it off. And so here's the finished piece, and man, did this turn out absolutely beautiful. I love the way this piece turned out. It felt really good in the hand. It's a bit heavy but well balanced. It's balanced right up towards the edge of the blade, and I haven't tested in a piece for a while, so I definitely had to take this one out and test with it. It's such a thin piece that it just glided through the ballistics gel. Like the second strike here, I thought I missed at first, but I didn't. There was a definite slash right in the piece, but it just absolutely cut. It was a gnarly piece. The dagger side, the pahoa side, I wasn't really going for full strength. I was going maybe, 20, 30%, maybe 40%, and I was stabbing in a good 4 inches, maybe 3.5. So a pretty gnarly piece. Ton of fun to build. Absolutely beautiful koa and grain, and then I have large tiger shark on there, and so you can see those slashes, man. Those are so deep. Probably on that primary slash up there, maybe 2 inches deep. The second slash down there, 1.5 inches deep, and then you can see where I kind of glided across the edge there and it cut into the whole thing. Just a ton of fun. Well, if you liked the video, go ahead and give me a like and subscribe. If you'd let me know what you'd like to see me make next. I actually have an awesome project coming up next. I'm super excited about that, so definitely stay tuned for that. But this piece was a ton of fun to work on. I will be posting this piece up eventually for sale on my Instagram. So if you're interested in purchasing a piece like this, look me up there. It's the same name, Koa Studio. Mahalo nui for everyone that tunes in and watches my videos. I greatly appreciate it. It's always a ton of fun, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.